Hi, my name is Tim, and today I'm here to talk to you about ATK's new Freeride 16 binding that comes out next winter. ATK have managed to take in all the innovations that they have on their heavier platform and squeeze them into a much lighter package. One of these innovations is the cam release system that ATK has been using for quite some time now. These pins in the rear, they can rotate when you step into the binding, which minimizes the friction and the wear that you normally see on traditional U-spring bindings. This means that this binding will have a much longer life and it will release in a much more predictable way, as the pins will stay around for much longer. One additional benefit of this is the fact that you have fully independent release values on both the lateral and the vertical release. And on this binding in particular, you can release both of those values completely independently from 9 all the way up to 16 to further help you stay in the binding when things start to get a bit shattery on your skis. Is the elastic response system. So on traditional alpine bindings, the heel is able to move back when the ski flexes. And this is because otherwise you will pop out of the binding in the front. Traditionally on lighter weight ski touring bindings, you only have a tiny gap between your boot and the back of the binding that takes up that system. But as we transition into more powerful ski touring gear for each season, ATK have now stepped up their game from the traditional 4mm of space with the additional 8mm of the elastic response system. One more innovation when we're here in the back is the Freeride spacer. So on traditional alpine bindings, your ski boot is directly in contact with the bottom of your binding and the ski for a more direct power transfer. On ski touring bindings, you're traditionally just been suspended by these two pins with the boot still in the air. This is obviously not so good when you start to have more powerful wide skis and powerful boots, because you will have a disconnect between the ski and the boot, which is not that nice. So to combat that, ATK ships with this binding the Freeride spacer. So this is a spacer that is adjustable up and down to suit your particular boot, which helps deliver the power directly from your boot via the spacer into the ski directly. One thing on older ATK bindings on the Freeride series, then they had the ski touring brake in the front of the binding. It's kind of awkward to handle, and to be completely fair, that ski touring brake did not work at all. That ATK has now moved the brake to the rear, which does feel a lot more intuitive, and this brake actually works. Also, the locking mechanism for the brake is among the best I have seen. You have a little button here that you push, and then you push down the binding, and it's locked there. You can take this brake and push it all over the place, and it's not gonna go anywhere. When you want to disconnect it, it's equally easy. You just press firmly down on the ski stopper, push the button in, and it's open. It's really quite easy. So in the top here, they have the same design on the toe piece as they did last year with the Freeride 14 binding. So to quickly summarize this, they have this snowpack proof design, which, well, according to them, is supposed to never land you in that situation where you have snow underneath the binding here, such that you cannot step into it. While I do see how this is supposed to work in theory, because if you have the binding in ski mode, when you have it on your pack, there's no way for any snow to get into this system. But if you do have the binding like this, which well, most of us do, because this is the normal way to leave your binding when you're not in them, then you have this opening here. And when I was out in Sylarna this winter, we had a particularly bad weather. A lot of wind, a lot of snow, and temperatures just below 0, which is the perfect weather to have snow end up all over the place. And unfortunately, one of the photographer that was out with us, his binding, he had a Rider 14, and he had snow that came into underneath the binding such that he couldn't step into it. And since they have designed the binding to not have snow enter it in the first place, it's impossible to get the snow out of there once it's in there. So while this system it's a nice try to have a binding that doesn't have any issues with the snow, but if you end up with snow in it, which is possible, then you're kind of screwed unless you have hot water that you can pour over the binding with you. So how is this binding to use then? Well, this is by far the easiest binding I've ever had to step into. Both the toe and the heel requires little to no effort to step into, which is really nice. Especially if you're out in softer snow, it can be a pain to step into a tech binding that's on higher release value. It's really easy to lock out the toe with your pole so you don't have to reach down. And this height adapters on the rear for walking is also really quite easy to use. And as previously mentioned, the locking for this brake is really easy. So overall, I'm really happy with this binding. The only downside for me is the fact that you can get snow underneath the toe. So apart from that, this really is my favorite binding that I have tested so far in this 350 gram weight class. So yeah, that's it for me. Hope you liked the video, and yeah, subscribe if you want to see more of this content coming. All right, see you guys next winter.